All right, guys, welcome back to the Strong Life Podcast. I'm here with my great friend, Ron McKeefery. Ron is going to be one of the speakers at Underground Strength Con. Ron is a close friend of mine. I've been friends with Ron for a long time, but also during, tough times when I was transitioning out of college and going back to teaching and not sure what I was going to do, I really had a lot of awesome conversations with Ron. And I've also said this to a lot of people is that Ron is always ahead of the curve of what's happening in our field, in our industry. And so we're going to talk about two topics. Number one, Ron authored a book, CEO Strength Coach, published that book about 10 years ago. And at that time, I said, man, this is way ahead of the curve. Most people are like, no, no, no. I am a strength coach. I'm on the floor. I coach, period. End of story. And so, Ron, welcome to the show. And I want to dive a little bit into CEO Strength Coach, the framework. And 10 years ago, what was running through your mind where you felt that, and you must have been writing it obviously before 10 years ago. So I would love to hear some backstory on it and the kind of the framework to it.
Yeah, man. Well, shoot, a lot there. First, Zach's one of my favorite people on the planet, and just excited to be here. And we all always love our conversations. And I mean, it's looking in a mirror because I mean, you're the guy that was posting, doing Ryan Lee stuff early on when nobody was doing internet stuff, and so I know just like I did, and others. You took a lot of grief for that when you're an outlier, when you do something ahead of the ahead of the curve. It's not always looked at as being ahead of the curve. Sometimes it's
That's right.
you get all kinds of shots, and so I like that space, that kind of blue ocean space. I like being there. I like going left when everybody else is going right, and I know you do as well. So we identify with that with each other. But yeah, man, the book. I mean, it goes back so far, really. I think when I was at South Florida, this is probably 2008 or nine, our head coach got fired for something that he really didn't do. Like they said, he struck a player. Him and I were the only ones in the locker room. All he did was grab a kid's chin and like straighten up the chin, hey, look at me when I'm talking to you. And that turned into getting hitting, and he got fired. And then because of that, even though we'd taken a program from one AA to one A to number two ranking at one point. I'd been strength coach of the year. All of that, I could have been fired, because there was a coaching change, and that just didn't sit well with me. And that led me down kind of this path of discovery in terms of the entrepreneur space. I'd always kind of been an entrepreneur and thinking outside the box in the strength space. But then I was like, oh man, if I get fired, like I got three adopted kids, I got a wife, I got like what am I going to do? And I didn't like the fact that my livelihood was held in somebody else's hands, and that kind of led me down this kind of entrepreneur path. Led me to a book called E Myth Revisited. It's a great business book, but in that book they laid a framework of being a great technician, to be a success. And I was obsessed with being a success in strength and conditioning. But to be a success, you had to be three things. You had to be a great technician. You had to know sets, reps, progressions, regressions, those types of things. You have to be a great manager of time, people, and resources. And you have to be an entrepreneur. You have to be forward thinking. You have to be constantly sharpening the sword and challenging your ideals. And when I looked at that through the lens of a strength coach, I was like, man, that's exactly right. Like, all these coaches and a lot of coaches, they go through that in stages. Like they become a great technician, then they become a great manager, and then maybe they get to the entrepreneur part if they last long enough, right? And the reality is that if you're going to be a success, and when I looked at all the people that had success that actually retired in this space, they were all three of those things at once. They worked on those simultaneously, and so that's what I did. I put a lot of time and effort into kind of building myself in all three of those areas. And I think because of that, anytime you look outside of your discipline for inspiration, and you look at other disciplines like business and leadership and group dynamics and those types of things, it's going to make you a better coach. And that's really kind of what that book was all about.
I feel like the past, when COVID hit and then NIL happened, or a lot of coaches are forced into becoming an entrepreneur. And when I, know some of these coaches, and then you kind of see a post on Instagram, hey, I was at such and such college or university, and now they're trying to figure it out. I think it's like you're when your back again is against the wall, it's a good thing. But if you never took the time, as you were just saying, I was studying entrepreneurship, I was studying Ryan Lee, your back is against the wall in a bad way. It's like going to play football, but you never showed up for summer workouts.
Gotcha.
It's even worse than that. So CEO strength coach. It's funny that you said, like, I forgot how much hate I got for posting stuff online. We're like, hey man, I'm just trying to help people. And it's very interesting. So if you were, you'll be speaking to a room of coaches predominantly in the private industry, but we will have some college strength coaches, some high school strength coaches. When you're speaking in front of coaches, because you have spoken at a lot of events, what runs through your mind that you feel messages you need to get to them? Kind of when I have kids do a closeout, which by the way, I learned watching your old South Florida videos on YouTube. It's some super creative stuff, training on the beach, like all this. There was always like an athlete closing it out. A kid is today's like, I don't know what to say. I go, what would you say if you're in front of a crowded room of athletes? What is the secret to the success? And then they think, so if you're in front of a crowded room of coaches, Ron, what are these like one or two things you feel like topics you must hit home for them?
Yeah, I think what's fun. I've spoken around the world, and every time I go to speak or I've been asked to speak, like honestly, I'm begging to talk training because I want to talk training.
Yes.
But the reality is that more often than not, I get asked to speak about management or leadership or those types of things, and that is my space. I've done a lot of work in that space to grow. I mean, I've got my PhD in that area and all those types of things. But to answer your question, I think I try to put myself in the shoes of the coach, right? And every coach, you have to have this healthy ego to be in this field, to do it at a high level, to be up in front of a bunch of alphas and get them to charge the mountain, right? Like you have to have that. But at the same time, you're having to balance and reconcile that with like a very unstable environment. What how you're judged, how you're evaluated is not always the best way that's the case, right? You've got, your time away from your family and all the insecurities that kind of come with that, and being, this feeling like you're raising other kids, other people's kids, but you're not maybe raising your own kids the way that you want to do or the same level of intensity.
Right.
And so all those things, those insecurities, those are the things that I've brought up just naturally because I want to be an authentic person. I want to share the wins and the losses. And by bringing that up, I think a lot of coaches identify with that and see that in my content and appreciate it because, again, I mean, you go through this in different stages. Some are mature enough to be able to bring that up and talk about it and get help or seek out ideas. But, just like me for an early part of my career, like I didn't want to show any kinks in the armor. Like I wanted to be the freaking, I didn't want to have anybody think that I was nothing but the best, and
Right.
so I think that was, I think that's what I try to do when I get in those environments, just talk about the things that I think other people are thinking, they're just not willing to say.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said I want to talk about training. I also like to be very transparent, and I tell people, man, I just want to listen to a podcast on West Side Barbell and, guys talking about training hard. And then I have this conversation with my head coach at the underground is we don't do any of that advanced stuff because most of our athletes are not even going, competing even in the college level. So you're excited for that. But the thing that creates growth and actually impact is the leadership, the management, and the getting the team to have these somewhat of a balance. And so, Ron, what's interesting is you've been at this long enough and you've been in the college sector and also like the global sector. You were working with Play and you were really like head of all this like global operations. And since that time, we've seen college coaches not even segue from coaching into a leadership or management. They've segued out of coaching, the very thing that they loved because it was destroying the family. And so I think that goes back to CEO strength coach is if you have these other aspects to your business outside of just coaching, that transition out can be smoother. It could be less strenuous on the family. But, I think people don't realize that if you're coaching in the college or the private sector, you could easily put in 12-hour days. And on Saturdays, you could put in quite a lot. And then on Sunday, you're kind of like leftovers for your family. It's kind of heartbreaking, Ron, to see great coaches leaving. And also, we've seen great coaches have a lot of struggles with substance abuse, emotional issues because of the stress of the sport, it kind of, or
Right.
the profession. So it's been pretty heartbreaking to see. So, with all that being said, you know, is there a change in the future that I've always felt like you're a visionary. You're always seeing what's coming. Do you see a change outside of, in the college sector? I see a lot of technology. I see this high performance theme happening. But I still see people putting in crazy amount of hours, maybe not even necessary to be there that much. And is there something that you see coming down the pipeline when it comes to the strength training industry in the private sector, college sector that we should be prepared for that falls under how to be your own CEO? Loaded question.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot to unpack there. I think the first thing I would say is I think as humans, as coaches, as whatever, I think we have a very reductionist line of thinking where we think it's either or.
Mm,
We can either be great at our job or great at home, but we can't be both. Or we can either be a great coach or we could be a great business person, but we can't be both, And I think when you have that line of thinking, I think it's the complete opposite of what we tell with our athletes all the time is like when there's growth, like, you have to grow as a human. Like you have to stress your present capacity for there to be a neuromuscular adaptation. So you have to do the same thing in your career and stress yourself to develop skills and think outside the box and so that you're prepared and kind of leads into the second thing is being prepared, right? Like it's okay. Like I love this job. Like I love coaching. I love everything about it, but you also got to know like how you're evaluated, the volatility of it, all the things kind of come into it, right? And so you have to prepare for that. So if you go into it knowing that, okay, there's not going to be great, there's not going to be this perfect work-life balance, right? That you have to, it's going to be skewed a little bit to be elite at anything.
yes.
But that what I always tell people is that, you might be, 80 at work and 20 at home, but when you're at home, you better be 100% present, right? That 20%, you better be 100% present. But all that said, I think you got to develop those skills, and you got to look to the outside. To answer your question, your last question there, like looking forward, it's a scary thing for our profession as strength coaches because like we are not too far away from going into some office, getting a blood prick, and all of a sudden this the perfect workout, the perfect diet plan, maybe even some sort of accountability with a shock collar or shock, some sort of account, like digital accountability, like all, like if you're resting on the fact that you can write a program right now, like you're on a you got a shelf life. Like this isn't
Mm,
going to last that long for you, and I think too many coaches are relying on this, like, oh, I work hard, or I work a lot of hours, or I get along with the athletes, or those aren't differentiators. Those are prerequisites. Like if you don't have those things, you won't be in that space,
right.
for very long. And so you have to develop these skills, and you have to think outside the box. So looking forward, if you look at history and you just study history, right? Like it used to be you went to a plant, right, for 50, for 40 years.
One job.
You got your watch, you had your retirement or your pension or whatever, and you sailed off into the sunset. Well, that's not the way of the world. That's not where the world is headed. And you
Yes.
just look at, again, to all these other inspirations. A lot of people, they get out of this field for a lot of things, right? One is maybe they're forced out by by reduction in the workforce, which is also coming pretty soon with NIL and the resources that are being put into college athletics. You
Meaning
know,
what, Ron? Like
I think
the
jobs are going to go away.
what jobs would go away?
I think, well, I mean, I think you look at the model of college athletics, like it's not sustainable because there's only a handful of sports that make money.
Correct.
So those sports are going to have resources, but eventually those other sports, they're going to have to find a revenue model and support the staffs that come with that, or they're probably going to disappear,
Also,
and
but what about, I don't want to open up this can of worms too much, but I also feel like NIL is not sustainable unless every few years there's this new round of donors or sponsors. Like Ron, let's say you were, everybody listening knows my daughter plays tennis in college, and then Ron McKeefery is donating, 500 grand a year to Bucknell women's tennis. And then after 3 years, Ron McKeefery's like, guys, like what am I even giving you money for over and over? And then you're out, and then they got to find that. So will NIL, I mean, what is,
uh, yeah, NIL. I mean, it's gonna go more from donor base to corporation base,
oh, own,
which it
right.
which it already has in a lot of ways. But
Like,
eventually, those businesses are not going to see that return on investment that they need to see for them to continue to be that support, like they're talking. And the rich are going to get richer. And I think we're in for a big shakeup when it comes to college athletics in terms of the organizations and all those types of things. That's a bigger conversation. But
yep.
my point is this: is that I think anytime that there's going to be a reduction in the workforce, or you look back in history, reduction in the workforce, or you look um, or trying times or whatever, right? People have started to kind of venture out, and I think where you see the world at right now, like it's kind of this gig economy where nobody is excited, about. There's a lot of people that they get, that's why there's a midlife crisis, right? Because they get about halfway through their career and they're like, I just don't like doing this anymore either,
Hmm.
and so they want to do something else. So I think you see a lot of people now doing a lot of things because a lot of people have a lot of different interests, right? And so I think the future is creating multiple revenue streams around the passions that you have in your life and monetizing those things to where now I want to be $1 million strength coach. Well, that's going to be maybe 10 bubbles of $100,000. So
Yes.
$100,000 is going to come from coaching. $100,000 is going to come from content and speaking and writing and doing those things. $100,000 is going to come from investments. $100,000 is going to come from, you know, a hobby, and whatever it might be, whatever those passions are. And going back to your point earlier with these coaches, like you have to develop these skills. Too many coaches, they think that their exit plan is I'm either going to go into athletic administration, I'm going to go sell equipment for some equipment company, or I'm going to go open a gym, you know, and all three of those skills require, different skill set than what you've been developing. You're gonna excel. Strength coaches, coaches in general, to be in that environment, like you're developing skills that a lot of intangibles that people relish. But unless you learn the business side of that, once you become a gym owner, like you're done just being a strength coach. Like you're as much of a business owner as you are a strength.
More,
Yeah, more
more,
so.
tons of, I
And
mean, yeah, the marketing machine never ends. And I forget, we had this conversation, Ron, about all these multiple streams of income years ago, you
that's
know,
right.
years ago.
I think that's where we're at. I think I think as coaches, if you don't have those things, if you don't have this ecosystem of things that you can either put a little bit more gas into when you need to, or maybe pick a little less attention from when something's not working, then then that when you put all your eggs in one basket, historically that's when you've seen negative things happen.
Yes. So I don't know. I don't want to say the death of the strength coach, but I feel like in the college sector, they're looking for to be highly specialized. So, are you highly specialized in speed? Are you great at leadership, management, team building, and building? Like that's why Nick Saban had that guy at Alabama. Everybody's like, "Hey, he's not a great strength coach," but they were winning. He had them tough. He knew how to build them up. That was his. wheelhouse. And then I think still people like that about him. And so leaning into a strength, having a niche, but still having multiple streams, and being a creator. You have to create. There's these apps that allow coaches to put their workouts online, but those apps are getting overly crowded, and then
Yeah.
it waters down the value. So a lot of interesting stuff. What we're gonna shut it down here. I wanted to make it short. What were you gonna say, Ron?
Well, I
To
think one thing before you jump off there, I think
Yep.
what you just said there, I think it's the number one thing that strength coaches or coaches in general are lacking, mostly because of our education, right? We went to school for exercise science, biomechanics, kinesiology, all those things. We didn't go to school for organizational leadership and group dynamics and budgeting and, business and all these different things that go into managing time, people, and resources,
Yes.
And so if you're not putting effort into those things, and when I say manage people, I'm talking manage your family, manage your athletes, manage, lead up, lead down. Like if you're not putting time into learning the best practices for doing that, that's going to be the separator. Because to your point earlier, like coaching in general, like you're going to have to start fighting for your job, and it's not because you're a great strength coach. It's also because you can get along with people. You can get them to run through a wall and come back and pick up the pieces. You can get, you can lead up and get and garner resources when you need to. All those things go into being elite at that job, and it's getting you further and further away from the weight room.
Yeah. And things will continue to change. Me being in a high school, I had to change the schedule and have many meetings with administration saying, kids are not staying after school anymore. They have to go to three different travel teams, mandatory practices, year-round travel, indoor, outdoor, all this stuff. And if we don't get it during the day, then I don't really have a job. But I'm also ready to get fired at any time because I have my gym, I have my online business, I have other aspects to the business. And
Right.
even you and I had said we could even go out of the strength and health fitness industry and move into another leadership role. So, CEO, strength coach, Ron McKeefery, cannot wait to see you at Underground Strength Con. And then for people to follow you on socials, I will link everything up in this YouTube video and on the podcast. But R McKeefery on all social networks. And you brought back your podcast, CEO Strength Coach.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it. What else you got?
Appreciate you,
And
buddy.
anything
No,
else, my
man.
bro?
No, I'm so excited to come up, spend some time with you up there, Jersey, New York, whatnot. And
Yes,
I'm excited about what you've got going on and ways to support that. So, man, thank you so much.
you are the best. We'll see you at Underground Strength Con. We'll see everybody who's listening. Hopefully, you guys come out and make the trip, not just for learning, but inspiration, networking, being around bigger thinkers. It's just like who do you train with? If you train with people that aren't working, you don't get stronger. They always say this year we're honoring Louis Simmons and Westside Barbell. And a lot of people who trained under Louis, they always said the training works everywhere, but it worked the best at Westside because Louis was a master at managing everybody and bringing the right people together. So undergroundstrengthcon.com and other links, resources are below, as well as Ron's social. And we will see you guys soon. Talk to you later. Thanks for watching and listening to the Strong Life Podcast.